long time, or maybe you're just getting started. You're just looking around and thinking how crazy it is. We usually cover the basics. You get your food, you get your water, you get your ammunition. Don't forget your ammo. You get your battery chargers, solar battery chargers, or whatever. But a lot of times I think people will forget their meds. Okay, whether it's chronic meds, antibiotics, I think a lot of people don't even realize that you can stock up on that stuff. They go to the doctor, they go to the pharmacy, and the pharmacist said, oh, here's your 2 month supply or whatever. Well, you can actually stock up on a lot of these meds by going to jdrucker.com/meds. You'll talk to the good folks over at Jace Medical. They can get you a 12-month supply of certain prescription drugs. They can get you emergency meds, all sorts of good stuff, things that you may or may not need, but it's always good to have it on hand, because I guarantee you, even if you don't think you need it today, you might need it in the future. jdrucker.com/meds. You're listening to the J.D. Rucker Show. Let's begin. It wasn't racism, it wasn't sexism. Those were not the reasons, neither of them, nor both of them combined, they were not the reasons that Kamala Harris lost the election, or perhaps more importantly, that Donald Trump won the election. That seems to be the narrative, and I don't know if it's a majority. It might not be a majority, but there are a lot of leftists, both in corporate media as well as podcasters. It's not just the big guys, it's also the little guys out there in media that are saying that this was a result of racism and sexism. There's also not a few in the Democrat Party as far as operatives, as well as actual politicians who are saying the same thing. Not nearly as many as in the media. I think people are really starting to, especially on the left, they're really starting to point fingers and try to find an actual reason, an actual solution to how it all went wrong. We saw, I think most of us, if you've been watching, you've probably seen some of those videos that show leftists. There's one in particular. I wish I should have called it up to play it here today. But it was this lady. She was a political analyst of some sort, and she was talking about how she went to go, it was around 5 p.m. Eastern time, and she went to go buy her bottle of champagne that she was going to pop that night, and she was talking to the guy behind the counter, and it's like, oh, he's like, oh, what are you celebrating? She's like, oh, I'm going to celebrate Kamala's win, and he's kind of like, oh, I don't know if that's going to be the case, and she's like, look, I'm a political analyst. Of course it's going to happen. I know this is going to happen, and I can tell who you're voting for. You poor lost soul. we didn't see a follow-up video from her. I'm sure there was one. I didn't. I cringe at that stuff. I know some people really get a kick out of watching others, especially if they're pretentious and wrong. People like to watch them suffer. I tend to not to. I just assume, they got it wrong. They're probably suffering big time right now. Let's just leave it at that. I tend to avoid those types of videos and sentiment. Not because, it's not bad. It just doesn't do it for me. It doesn't entertain me like it does apparently other people. But it is noteworthy, though, that in these videos you are seeing a lot, and the more are coming out now. It seems as if, and correct me if I'm wrong, but it seems as if there's this new, not racism, not sexism, there's this new excuse, and it's a feel-good excuse. It's not necessarily a real excuse. I don't think they actually, they might actually think this, but it makes them feel good. Like this guy is like, I've got like 3 degrees. I went to Harvard, and I'm getting dirty looks because I'm wearing my Harris Walz hat out of like Walmart, and then I just like, these people. In other words, they're trying to say that America's too dumb to recognize that Kamala Harris was amazing, and I would challenge any single one of these pretentious fools to an intellectual debate about policies, about the falsehoods that Kamala Harris was spreading, about the inefficacy of those policies that she rarely, if ever, discussed, but that were sitting there in the background. Hey, she had 80 pages on her website that was dedicated to policy. She kept highlighting that. Couldn't name one of them, of course. But hey, it is what it is. So today we're going to go through my non-exhaustive but pretty long list of reasons that Kamala Harris lost, reasons that Donald Trump won. And all of these reasons are bigger reasons than racism. They're bigger reasons than sexism, and they're bigger reasons than the educated people were the ones who recognized that Kamala Harris was the right choice, and it was the dumb Americans, the people working at Walmart. They're the ones that have ruined the country for us all. I will be moving to Wales here soon, and there I will probably be mugged by migrants, but whatever, we'll see. All right, so let's get started. And again, I'm not going to number this list. We're just going to go down the list because I have a finite show, and we don't want to waste your time. Let's start with the elephant in the Democrats' room. No, there's actually probably a dozen elephants in the Democrats' room, but let's start off with the elephant that's wearing the glasses. Tim Walz. Tim Walz was one of the worst vice presidential choices we've seen in a long time. We can make fun of Tim Kaine. We can make fun of Dick Cheney, even though they won. We can make fun of Dan Quayle, who won once and lost once. We can make fun of Al Gore, who won twice until he actually ran, and that didn't work out for him. Joe Lieberman was fine, probably the most lucid vice presidential candidate that we've seen in a long time coming from the left. Of course, there was Joe Biden. But here's the thing, and let's start off with Obama. And I want to see if you notice a trend. So Barack Obama, he came out there, and he wanted to get, we knew, they didn't have to say it, we knew that he was going to select as his running mate a white man. We knew this. They didn't have to declare it like Joe Biden did. Oh, I'm only going to get a woman of color for my vice president. No, Barack Obama, we knew he was going to get a white man to try to, I don't know, I guess add some whiteness to the ticket, okay? That was their intention. We knew it was going to be somebody, but it was conspicuous that he took somebody who was clearly below him intellectually, clearly below him on the charisma scale. Joe Biden was not a good pick as far as, hey, this is the guy that we want as vice president of the United States. He was a good pick because it was the pick of, he's the guy that we want, that we can control. And he's the guy that we want because he won't overshadow Barack Obama. He'll be supportive. Now, fast forward. Joe Biden runs. Joe Biden needs to pick somebody, but he needs to pick somebody who's below him. At least he thinks he does. I think he would have been better off picking somebody more qualified, but had he done that, there's probably a good chance that he could have gotten booted from office early. His dementia might have caught up with him faster earlier than whenever June or I guess it was June, July? No, June. June is when apparently corporate media finally clued into it, and the rest of America finally learned that, oh my gosh, Joe Biden's got dementia. Holy cow! Why didn't we see the signs? Don't get me started there. Anyway, so he picked Kamala Harris. She was his insurance policy. She was, he was bad. He was below Obama. He was worse than Obama as far as intellectually. Nobody wanted him, but then he picked somebody who was below him, who was worse than him, who nobody could picture replacing him, and that was Kamala Harris. Now fast forward to Kamala Harris, and she's got some pretty decent. I mean, Mark Kelly and Josh Shapiro. Look, I disagree with them ideologically, but they're pretty stout. Okay, they're pretty stout guys as far as politically speaking. There was a good chance that they could have done some damage. I don't think either of them were at the par of a J.D. Vance, but they were both above Tim Kaine. That's for sure. And obviously they were also, unfortunately for the Democrats, they were also better and above Kamala Harris, and she didn't want that. She had to pick somebody who was below her intellectually, charismatically, and somebody who wouldn't make her look small. Okay, and believe it or not, yes, height comes into the picture here. wouldn't want a man towering over her, as she's supposed to be the president and he's the vice president. They took that into consideration as well. How tall is Tim Walz? I'm going to assume he's short. I didn't pay too much attention to him. Tim Walz height. According to this, Tim Walz is. It doesn't say. That's weird. I don't want to go to Google. Don't make me go to Google. Oh wow! It says he's 6'2". Maybe I'm wrong. Maybe they were okay with him. She probably wasn't, but I guess they didn't have very many options, because intellectually speaking, as dumb as Kamala was, Tim Walz might have been dumber. And I'm not talking about book smarts here, okay? I'm talking about like political savvy. I'm talking about just this. I mean, he exuded. Please don't like me. He exuded, funny uncle that you see during the holidays, right? That's who Tim Walz was, and that was why he was picked as her vice president. He was just abysmal. He had gaffes, he had goofs, he was goofy, gaffy, everything, and that clearly that hurt the campaign immensely. So let's go to this list is going to take way too long if I don't speed it up. Next, we have Elon Musk. Elon Musk, of course, came around and started fighting for liberty. And we started seeing signs of it relatively early on in the campaign, but he didn't really come out and start endorsing until the months ahead. And that's important because I think that his infusion of energy, it wasn't just X. A lot of people focus, especially Democrats, they like to focus on the fact that as the owner of X, that he has an unfair advantage. Nobody ever, Democrats never talk about Zuckerbucks. Democrats never talk about any of that stuff. They don't go down the road of how big tech and their owners are invariably leftist. That's okay to them. It's when one of them diverges from the herd, like Elon Musk, and goes on the side of freedom and liberty. That's where they all of a sudden, it's like, oh my gosh, we've got to stop him. We got to stop him. It is what it is. But yes, he had a dramatic impact, I would say. Not just with his tweets, not just with his rallies, and he had some amazing rallies. Definitely not just with getting people to sign on to the agenda, sign on to the initiatives that he was plugging in there. No, he actually made a huge impact in his messaging. I think that's important because he is, people say that he's a genius because he can land rockets. And I don't disagree that he's a genius, but that's not why he's a genius. He didn't sit there, with the computers and coding. I mean, he wasn't building the rockets. He was finding the people to help him build the rockets. He wasn't sitting there welding stuff. Okay, he wasn't sitting there doing the math and figuring out the calculations on how much rocket fuel and where it needed to be displaced and this, that, or the other. Okay. He had other people figure it out. They told him how it was. Now, because he's a smart man, he was able to then take that information and understand it. But his real genius, if we look back through all of his companies, his real genius has been with proper branding. And that's much harder than I think anybody ever realizes. If you forced me to pick, which one is more intellectually challenging when you're looking at certain sciences, not all of them, some of them are pretty crazy. But like, for example, which is more intellectually challenging, biology or branding? I would say that branding is definitely more challenging. And I'm not just talking about, you got to build a logo. I'm talking about the level of branding that's necessary to be able to build Tesla, to be able to build X, or take X and take it to brand new heights, which he has. To be able to push PayPal through. There was, at the time, before PayPal was big, okay, there was a sea of wannabe PayPals. Okay, PayPal wasn't the first and it wasn't the biggest, but it quickly became the biggest by far. And then it even spawned separate cottage industries within the payment processing industry, the payment sharing industry. It was amazing, and all these can be attributed to brand. Okay, now it became self-replicating once his brand started overshadowing everything else. I would argue that it's the whole switch over to X, for example. That's good. That was, it works. It makes sense. It's a catchy logo, but if Twitter without Elon Musk had tried the exact same move, they wouldn't have done it. He has obviously become a brand of his own, and that did have a huge impact, I think, on the election, because it made some people who maybe would have thought of Donald Trump as the unintellectual choice. It's like, yeah, he might be able to fix it because of his policies, but really only the dumb people like him. Well, Elon Musk is not dumb. Neither is Donald Trump, for that matter. But Elon Musk is not dumb, and so you can't say that, he only appeals to low intellect people. That's not true. That's far from true. I would argue that people of great intellect who are honest with not only the rest of the world, but with themselves, that when they look and compare policies, when they look and compare results from past policies, because this was the first time we've ever had, I don't think it's noted enough, this is the first time we've ever had, at least in America, where we got to see a president versus technically speaking, a vice president, but who was probably more involved than other vice presidents of the past because of Joe Biden's failing mental acuity. So you got to see two administrations, two sets of policies back to back, and the results from both. So given all those things, I mean, there's the true intellectuals, not the pseudo intellectuals, not the ones that have, oh my gosh, my IQ is like 130. No, I'm talking about the real smarties. The smarter they were, as long as they were engaged and honest, they could only come to the conclusion that Donald Trump was the best thing for America. Better than Kamala Harris by far. Next, after Elon, we have Tulsi Gabbard. Now, I got to be clear. I'm not a fan of Tulsi Gabbard, even a Republican Tulsi Gabbard. I'm not a detractor. I don't have anything against her per se, but it's just like I watch her speeches, I hear her words. It's like, yeah, she's good. I mean, she's good. She seems to be speaking from the heart. That's good. I like that about her. But it's not like some people get really, truly inspired by her. And I don't. But some people do. And her switchover, she added fuel to the fire. And I would say that if, because of her position of semi-neutrality after leaving the Democrat Party, if she had leaned towards Kamala Harris, that would have made a big impact. Did it make a huge impact that she went to Trump? I would say not as much. But had she gone to Kamala Harris, that would have made a much bigger impact because she has history with Kamala during the 2020 election. So the fact that she went to Trump and not to Kamala or even Joe, that it wasn't so much that she helped Trump as much as she didn't help them. And so that's why her role in this campaign should not be overstated. Gosh, I'm not going to get through this list. It's going to be a long day. We're going to have a long show, aren't we? Well, we are, depending on where you're watching it. If you are watching on World YouTube, well, we're going to have this show today, or this show at 1:30 Pacific, but then I'll be back after the show an hour later to continue the list. So you only get 30 minutes of me. And I would like to shout out, while I'm talking about Worldview Tube, let's talk about Worldview Beef, where now that Donald Trump has officially been determined to be the president-elect, I think a lot of people are breathing a sigh of relief, and rightly so. We dodged a bullet. We dodged 100, 1,000, 1,000,000 bullets on this one. But with that said, that doesn't change the fact that there are still concerns. There's still reasons for us to stock up, to be ready for whatever's to come. Now, I had said before the election, I said, look, if Kamala Harris wins, we're going to have to raise prices at worldviewbeef.com. She didn't win. Praise God for that. So we are not raising prices, and I'm going to continue temporarily our super amazing, awesome special. Go to worldviewbeef.com, use promo code JDR, and you'll get 35% off for a limited time. This is something that we can't afford. I can already tell my phone's going to be ringing from my partners. But look, I'm happy. We're in a good mood. Let's do this. worldviewbeef.com, promo code JDR. So this is one, there was an endorsement that came through very, very, very late, last minute, day before, that I think a lot of people think had a great impact, and that was Joe Rogan. Joe Rogan came out and he endorsed Donald Trump officially. Shortly after, or I think during, no, it was after, as he was promoting the Elon Musk interview that popped out of nowhere, nobody was expecting, but there it was, the day before the election, he did officially endorse Donald Trump. Now, a lot of people give that, credit, but keep in mind, there's a lot of people that make the decision last minute, but the night before an election, people have made up their mind at that point. So I would argue that Joe Rogan's endorsement didn't affect tens of thousands or hundreds of thousands or millions of votes, but his interview of Donald Trump did. And perhaps more importantly, Kamala Harris's lack of an interview with Joe Rogan did. Now, it would have been better for her to say something like, hey, we think that you're, and say this publicly, we think that we appreciate the offer to interview us. We watched the Trump interview. It was a softball interview. We're not interested. It's clear which side you're on. And so thanks, but no thanks. Instead, they said, yeah, let's do the interview. But let's completely and totally change your format. Let's not do the format that has worked to make you the most popular podcaster in the history of humanity. Instead, let's just do it 1 hour, and let's do it on our turf, not your turf. And it's like, really? I mean, why didn't you just say, let's make an excuse? They did it knowing that he wouldn't do it, and that this was their way of, hey, we tried. We wanted to do Rogan. He didn't want to do it. Either that, or they're just dumb. Because there's no way anybody would think that Joe Rogan would agree to such ludicrous, not lucid, unlucid, such ludicrous terms. Of course, he's not going to bow to those demands. But they pretended like that was the way to go. So yes, I think Joe Rogan made an impact, not with his endorsement, only because had he made the endorsement a week or a month before, yeah, I think it would have made an impact. Doing it the night before, nah, I don't think that made an impact. However, his interview with Trump was very good. It opened my eyes to how good of an interviewer he really is. I mean, this isn't just a personality out there. It's not just about the topics. The dude is skilled, okay? He's legitimately skilled beyond belief when it comes to running a show. And so kudos to him. I mean, I was impressed. So of all of the, move on to the next one. Of all of the endorsements that came, there was one that was seismic, more so than Elon Musk, in my humble opinion, and that was, of course, RFK Jr. But it wasn't just the endorsement. The endorsement alone would not have been bigger necessarily than Elon Musk's. Yes, he comes from Democrat royalty. RFK Jr. does. Yes, he ran as a Democrat and got pushed out. And imagine, by the way, just as a quick side note, imagine if they just let him run, said, hey, you want to run in a primary against the sitting president? Good luck with that. Go for it. If they had allowed him to run, I would say there's probably at least a decent chance that he would have won. Not won against Trump. I'm saying that he would have won the Democrat nomination, especially after that debate. Joe Biden probably still would have been forced to drop out at some point, and then I would say RFK Jr. would have had a better chance of getting installed or nominated or whatever by the Democrats than Kamala Harris. Seriously, I know that sounds weird, and I'm sure people are going to argue against it. Say, no, the Democrats hate RFK Jr. Yeah, they do. They do. But here's a little secret. They hate Kamala Harris, too. They really didn't want her. And Joe Biden, I don't have Joe Biden necessarily. I have him on the list for other reasons. But, we can make a very clear argument that this election came down to Joe Biden tweeting out that he endorsed and supported Kamala Harris. Had he not done that, we probably would have been looking at candidate Gretchen Whitmer or candidate Gavin Newsom or even candidate Mark Kelly, who Obama wanted. we would not be running against Kamala Harris had Joe Biden not thrown a monkey in the Obama Pelosi machine. I don't think you throw a monkey in a machine, whatever the idiom is. Yeah, Joe Biden. At the end of the day, he contributed a lot. And that's not even on my list. I just wanted to throw that out there because that's a discussion for another day. It's separate from this list. Anyway, RFK Jr. It wasn't just his endorsement. His endorsement was big, and the excitement behind his endorsement was big. But what really changed the game for Trump, and one could argue that this had such an impact that this was really what made it too big to rig. This took a campaign that was already doing very well at the time, that was already on pace to probably win, and put it up to untouchable level. And that's the fact that RFK Jr., Trump, in his wisdom, RFK Jr. in his grace, and the teams together working together, putting forth the idea of making America healthy again. It's political brilliance, number one, but it's also arguably the most exciting aspect of a Trump campaign. There are, I would say, millions of Americans, and I'm one of them, millions of Americans who are truly excited about the idea of Bobby Kennedy getting in there as long as he stays in his lane and focuses on health. That's it. If he does that, then this could be a truly impactful presidency because we've never had it. We've never once, at least in recent history, maybe you go back 50 years, but at least in recent history, we've never had an administration that could be so focused on health that they would be willing to take a super high-profile guy like RFK Jr. and give him widespread powers to make America healthy again. There was a video that came out. It was by, who was it? No, I think it was actually, you know what? It was Joe Rogan interviewing Dave Smith. And Dave Smith had noted that, I think it was. Dave Smith had noted that we've never had anybody focusing on the chronic illness disaster here in the United States of America. We lead the world in chronic illness. And yet, nobody ever says, I wonder why. You might have Michelle Obama go out there and change school lunches. You might have this, that, or the other, but nobody's actually even attempting to address the problem or find the core causes. RFK Jr. will. And we already know the answers. This is the sad part, is that there are the idea of ultra-processed foods, this concept of soft eating, creating soft men and weaker women. This is it's horrible enough with everything with all of the challenges we have on an individual basis here in the United States of America, and I have suffered from it. But when I no longer eat ultra processed foods. I no longer eat sugars, like at all. Okay, like donuts. I used to love donuts. If you couldn't tell, I might never eat a donut again. Now that I know it, it's not just the sugar aspect of it; it's the ultra processed food notion of it. So I think that RFK Jr. is going to have a dramatic effect. Now, on the lesser side of the RFK Jr. argument, I do want to point out that Nicole Shanahan has impressed me. I don't want her. I never wanted her to impress me because Nicole Shanahan is a radical leftist, okay? But she does share the one aspect that can pull. I think this is what pulled Elon Musk over. It's definitely what helped to pull RFK Jr. over. It pulled Nicole Shanahan over. And even before Trump, I think it pulled Tulsi Gabbard over to some extent. At least pulled her away from the Democrat Party. There's one thing that if you want to get to a leftist, I've always thought that if you just ask them, number one, do you trust government? No. Okay. Then why do you want more of it? Right? Because that's what your ideology pushes. With your worldview, with your political idea, you have to acknowledge the contradiction of You don't trust government. You believe that government's incompetent. You believe that government's evil, but you want more people, more of it out there, more control for government. And this starts to wake people up and make them realize that if they are going to be not leftist, but truly liberal, I'm not talking about the corporate media definition of liberal today. I'm talking about truly liberal, as in focusing on liberty and freedom. Focusing on, for example, the underprivileged, poor people. That's a component that is best served through freedom, not through more government. Government has demonstrated time and again that they can't handle power. They can't fix things. They don't build things, they don't fix things outside of certain very, very specific areas. Okay? Can they build weather modification machines? Sure. Can they build education programs? No, they cannot. So let's go to a break. If you're watching on Worldview YouTube, come back in an hour. If you're watching anywhere else, stay right there. I'll be right back. After Trump was elected president, I received a couple of communications from people. One via phone, well, text, and the other one via Twitter, X, direct message. People asking me, "Hey, now that Trump's back in office, is the economy going to get better?" And I said, "Yeah, in some ways it definitely will. Obviously, I mean, just Trump's presence alone will have a dramatic impact on the economy, and it will take things to the next level." But with that said, the threats still remain. Trump, Harris, didn't matter. They're still pushing, they being the powers that be, are still pushing for central bank digital currencies. They're still pushing for de-dollarization and the rise of BRICS. They're still pushing for the advancement of a worldwide economy. And while Trump will do everything in his power to prevent that, to at least slow it down, some of it is not within even the power of the United States of America itself. And this is why there is no reason, and you can see by the gold prices, there is no reason to doubt physical precious metals as a proper way to hedge against what is coming, because it's still coming. You know, there were certain scenarios that would have happened if Kamala Harris had won, and there are certain scenarios that will happen now that President Trump has won, and those scenarios still point in the same exact direction. That's the reason why even central banks are still buying up as much gold and silver as possible. That's why banks, financial institutions are recommending to their people, buy as much gold and silver as possible. I work with a faith-driven gold company. There are a lot of gold companies out there that get recommended by hosts. The one that I like happens to be driven by faith, and they actually do a tremendous job versus the competition. You can check out Genesis Gold Group by going to rumblegold.com. That's rumblegold.com, or read my testimony over at jdrucker.com/gold. So it definitely was not racism or sexism that caused Kamala Harris to lose, that helped Donald Trump to win. I've put together a list of approximately 30-something, 36 things that each individual one is a bigger reason than racism or sexism. Look, I would argue that if you would have taken a black woman and had her as the top of the ticket for the Trump campaign. In other words, obviously it wouldn't be the Trump campaign. We'll call it the, I don't know, call it the Alveda King Trump, or the Alveda King campaign. So Alveda King replaces Trump, same policies, same everything. Everything about her is the same. Okay. And you were to have replaced Kamala Harris with Gavin Newsom. Okay. And so you got a white man, on white straight man, at least we think he's straight, on the Democrat side, and you've got a woman of color on the Republican side, but everything else stays the same. Okay, same policies, same everything that I'm listing here on today's show as far as negatives of the Kamala Harris campaign and positives for the Trump campaign. You were to take those, kept everything the same, but had a black woman on the Republican side and a white man on the Democrat side, the results would not have changed. It wasn't racism. Did racism have an impact? Sure. But I would also argue that there were as many, if not more, people on the left-hand side who voted for Kamala because she is a person of color. There was a whole lot. I mean, you got to see a lot of these people that would just come out and say it. Yeah, no, we got to get Kamala in there. We can't have any more white men running this country. You heard that quite often. And conversely, there was also, I would argue, more people, especially women on the left, and even in the center, who voted for Kamala because they wanted the first woman president. More so, there were more of those people than there were people who would have been like, yeah, you know what, I might have voted for the Democrat, but I just don't want a woman. I don't want a woman as president. I'm sexist. So, no, sexism and racism, neither of them had the impact that's being expressed by many in corporate media, many in blogs and podcasts, as well as even a handful of actual Democrat politicians. Now, we are starting to see a lot more people coming out and on both sides and saying, look, especially when I say both sides, I'm talking to Team Biden versus Team Kamala. They're pointing fingers right now. A lot of them are pointing fingers, and that is just to demonstrate chaos. The reason that this is such news is because it's supposed to kind of highlight that, if a unified Democrat ticket would have won, it wasn't that Trump did anything good. It's that we didn't have Biden dropped out, and then Biden was bitter, and Biden's team didn't help out enough, and then Biden's team is saying, look, you guys had like $1 billion, and you still lost. Don't point fingers at us. You guys had a lot of advantages that the Biden campaign did not have. So don't blame us. So yeah, there's a lot of finger pointing, but at the end of the day, you had a very poorly ran campaign with a very bad candidate versus a very well-run campaign and a fantastic candidate. That's it. I mean, I could end the show right now and say it all breaks down to that, but I won't. So to recap, for those who missed the beginning of my list of 36, I was able to make it through 5, 6. Tim Walz, recap. Tim Walz, just disastrous pick. An absolute buffoon, a moron. Just harmed the campaign anytime he was put out there in any capacity whatsoever. From his weird dancing, to his waving, to his talking, to the words that were part of his talking, to his lies after lies after lies after lies. He didn't win his home district. Trump won his home district in Minnesota. Think about that. That'd be like Walter Mondale losing. Walter Mondale was able to pull out one state in '84, and that was his home state. Happened in Minnesota. Number 2, Elon Musk. Obvious huge impact there. Number 3, Tulsi Gabbard. Pretty good impact in a different way. Number 4, Joe Rogan, not because of his endorsement, but because, number 1, Trump went on his show and did very well. Number 2, Kamala didn't go on his show and pretended like it was Joe Rogan's fault for not bowing to her odd and inexplicable demands. Now, I say inexplicable, but the reason that, there's no chance. She couldn't have done the show. There's no chance that she could have done the show and been successful at it. It would have hurt her if she did the show, and they knew that. The only way they could do it is if they could somehow control Joe. I don't think anybody can control Joe Rogan. I don't know if Joe Rogan can control Joe Rogan. So she would have gone on there, and if she tried to do 2 hours of off-the-cuff responses, not knowing the questions, man, it would have been uglier. It would have been even more of a landslide. Number 5, by the way, these are not in any order at all. I did group them, so obviously I'm talking about individuals right now that contributed to the election results. But RFK Jr., probably the biggest overall individual person's impact. Not just his endorsement. It really was just waking us up to the idea that, oh my gosh, you're telling me the federal government could try to figure out what's causing all the chronic illness? The federal government can actually start to ask and answer questions regarding vaccines and regarding all these other things? Wow, sign me up. There were a lot of people I know. Personally, I know. There were a lot of people who were like, yeah, I was supported Trump before, but now I'm really excited. And there were other people that were like, I didn't really support Trump before, but I can really see if RFK Jr. is going to be involved and going to try to fix our health situation here in the United States, sign me up. All right, so now I started talking about Nicole Shanahan, and then I got on a little got sidetracked a bit. But it should be noted that she is, as a radical leftist, her participation in this campaign is a direct result of what the one topic that I think could pull a lot more people that are left-leaning, maybe even full-blown leftists, and make them realize that becoming liberals is better than being a leftist. And a liberal is different from a leftist, despite what corporate media wants to tell you. Liberals, I'm talking about a true liberal. Liberals want liberty. Liberals want freedoms. And that's something that the Democrat Party has just not done. They've gone against freedom in every possible way. I'm sure they could probably think of more ways. But every possible way that we could think of, they've opposed it. They don't want freedom of speech. They don't want any aspect of the First Amendment. They don't want freedom of press. They definitely don't want freedom of religion. And they don't want the Second Amendment to even exist. Or if it does exist, they want it to exist in a way that is refined, as they would put it, with modern sensibilities, which is to say massive, widespread gun restrictions to the point of eventually gun grabbing. And when I say eventually, I would argue that had Kamala Harris won, that she would at some point over the next 4 years done a full-blown, the most comprehensive and aggressive attempt to disarm Americans that we've ever seen in our history. So we dodged the bullet there. Funny. Anyway, so Nicole Shanahan, her contribution was not just the fact that she's a pretty good speaker. Okay, I mean, she comes across more sincere than the vast majority of actual politicians. She does a very good job of that. She seems kind of, I don't know, normal. You could say Elon Musk is this, that, or the other, but he's definitely not normal. You could say RFK Jr. is this, that, or the other, and all these other positives and some negatives, but he's not exactly normal. Okay, he's driven by things that, and lived lives multiple times, I think, or multiple aspects. Yes. We're not talking about Buddhism here. He hasn't lived multiple lives. He's lived multiple aspects of his life are incredible. I mean, how many people can say that their dad and uncle were assassinated? How many can say that they've been shunned by their own families publicly? How many can say that anyway, yeah, he's an exceptional guy. Nicole Shanahan is kind of one of us. Granted, extremely rich kind of one of us, but still down to earth in that regard. But her real contribution, the thing I think that made the biggest impact, was many of her videos. The videos that the Maha Alliance put out there, I've played them many times. They're the best I've ever seen. I mean, not even in the same world as the standard campaign videos. They killed it. And a dramatic. All right, number 7-ish. J.D. Vance. J.D. Vance. Yeah, I was not always a J.D. Vance fan. I never disliked him, to be clear. But I did not endorse him. Okay, I did not endorse him as when in his Senate run. I thought that he was the second best as far as Republicans running for the Senate. I was concerned, skeptical about his Never Trump past, but I've always been willing. Look, when it comes to Never Trumpers, I know that people make mistakes. I do. I was one of them. I was a Cruz guy back in 2016. And it wasn't until Donald Trump proved just how that he really wasn't going to lurch to the left, because I did expect that. I expected him to lurch to the left. And he didn't. Okay, I was wrong. And I admitted that very, very early. So once I started seeing the reality of a Trump administration, it's like, oh, okay, cool. I was wrong. I'm glad I was wrong. And let's do this. So that changed quickly for me. And so I've always been open. Now, a lot of people, I think, are they are, what shysters, I guess, shills. No, shill's the wrong word. They jumped on the Trump train only because it was convenient. And you could tell, because a lot of them you saw them abandoning Trump shortly after he lost, or well, won, but was had the 2020 election stolen from him. You saw a lot of people that had been never Trumpers before, but then all of a sudden they're on the Trump side, but then they switch back. Okay, those ones I don't trust. J.D. Vance wasn't one of them. J.D. Vance stuck with Trump, and that's a very telling sign. It's a good sign. And then his presence within the campaign, I think, allowed for there was an unspoken or not often spoken concern, I think, even amongst some Republicans, but definitely amongst independents, that look, Donald Trump is almost as old as Joe Biden. And we're talking about 4 years. What if? What if? I think J.D. Vance gave us the answer to that, because he stayed in lockstep with Trump, 99% aligned on policies and ideology. He demonstrated his abilities. I mean, the dude is wicked smart. He proved that very clearly during the debate. He's been proving it his whole life. And I think that the debate helped to introduce him to the rest of the country. And the rest of the country is like, okay, yeah, we can see it. If something happens to Trump over the next 4 years, this is the guy. I would argue that J.D. Vance is the best vice presidential pick for any administration when it comes to alignment. I've always said, I think that the dumbest thing in American politics, the dumbest thing, is that people seek a balanced ticket. And it all happens almost every time, to be clear. I mean, on both sides of the aisle, both parties, it's like, okay, well, John McCain is old and, a neocon, so let's, kind of boring, so let's liven it up with Sarah Palin. I mean, we tend to do that. It's like, Joe Biden is no white guy. Let's get a woman of color, who hated on, Joe Biden is supposed to be a moderate, so let's pick the most radical candidate that ran against him and put him as her as the vice president. And again, Barack Obama versus Joe Biden, night and day, okay? Intellectually, ideologically, in many ways, okay, they weren't very aligned on policy. Now, granted, I would say that Joe Biden's policies are determined by whatever his needs of the day are, because he is totally compromised, but it is what it is. Anyway, you get the idea. They always want a balanced ticket, right? You don't want a balanced ticket. You want your vice president to be in lockstep with the president. Because if something were to, God forbid, happen to the president, you don't want the agenda to change. You don't want the plans to change. Okay? You want a continuation of exactly what the president was promoting. And I think J.D. Vance, from take away his intellect, take away everything else about him, just the fact that his ideology, his worldview, his philosophies, and most importantly, his policies align almost perfectly with Trump, hands down. And again, not just because I like the guy or because I like the Republican side, but hands down the most accurate vice presidential pick that we've seen in a very, very, very long time. So he was good. Number 8. Gosh, I go too slow. I just go too slow, man. Number 8, Steve Bannon and Peter Navarro. 2 great American patriots who suffered in jail. And you can throw the J6 patriots into this as well. America has seen, over the last 4 years, America has seen that Democrats will jail their political opponents. I mean, that's all there is to it. We've seen that pastors who protest peacefully near abortion centers are treated far, far worse. SWAT teams go after them versus George Floyd rioters who end up getting nothing thrown at them, nothing done to them. Slap on the wrist, if they are even arrested or charged, which a lot of them were not. America started seeing this, and I think that the J6, so they could suspend disbelief. It's like, maybe there were crimes committed. Oh, we keep hearing about all the police officers that were hurt and killed, but as those lies started started being revealed, and they will be revealed. Praise God. I truly believe they'll be revealed even more once Trump is back in office. But yeah, so people were starting to think, maybe after seeing Grandma go to jail for walking through the Capitol, maybe they are going after their political opponents. Maybe that's the case. And then they jailed Navarro. It's like, wait a second. They're jailing Navarro for things that the Democrats have done in the past, and they didn't get jailed, but Navarro is, huh? And they jailed Bannon. It's like, wow, they really are. They're using the Department of Justice to take out Trump allies and supporters. People aren't stupid. We might, the corporate media thinks we are, and well, granted, many of us are, but not all of us are. And I think people really started seeing it, especially after Bannon went to jail. It's sort of like, wow, that really did happen. We're so used to seeing these politically tied people not go to jail for serious offenses. And for Navarro, well, both Navarro and Bannon and the J6ers to go to jail for extended periods of time over basically super ultra minor stuff. That woke people up. And we'll get to the lawfare aspect against Trump. We'll get to that in a minute. But I got to start buzzing through these a lot faster. I'm going too slow. All right, so let's talk about this next batch. That was batch one, just the people and personality. Now let's look at the next batch. Again, these are reasons that Kamala lost, reasons that Trump won, that are far more impactful than what many are saying, attributing it to, which is they say it's sex. No. Every reason, every individual reason, I'm not talking about the body of work here. I'm talking about each individual reason that I'm listing off today had a greater impact than racism and sexism combined as far as this. Let me just clear this out. I forgot to close out one of my messaging things. I keep getting notifications thrown in my face. All right. So now we're moving on to the Kamala and her relationship with the press. This batch of reasons. As we saw in the very beginning of the campaign, Kamala Harris likes to hide from the press. It took over a month before she did an interview. She never held a press conference. Okay, she never once held a press conference. You saw Trump hold press conferences like all the time. I mean, just randomly out of the blue. And if he was ever walking anywhere and press started talking to him, he would fire back. He would interact. He would do interviews. J.D. Vance would do interviews. They tried to, Kamala's first interview, I think the real turning point, the thing that, the one aspect of her interaction with the press that I think really woke a lot of people up, even people on the left, even Democrats, moderate Democrats, definitely many independents, and any maybe rhinos that were sort of maybe leaning away from the mean tweets and leaning towards her. I think the real wake-up moment for a lot of people was when she brought her comfort animal, Tim Walz. She had him tag along to her first interview. Her first corporate media interview since being installed as the Democrat nominee. Her first interview, she brought Tim Walz with her as an emotional support animal. And that was like, holy cow. Ugh. Is she scared? Can she not handle this by herself? She wants to be president of the United States, but she can't do an interview with an extraordinarily friendly, a total Kamala supporting journalist. I forgot who it was, but somebody who absolutely adored her and wanted her to win. I'm certain they gave her the questions up front, and she still needed her blankie. She still had to have her binky to take with her. My gosh, I think that was the turning point for a lot of people. Maybe hundreds of thousands of voters thought. I'm not saying that changed their vote. I'm saying that was kind of like a smack in the face. that was like, holy crap, maybe she really isn't as qualified or capable of doing this job as we have been led to believe. She hid from the press, and when she finally got out there, it was a disaster. All of her interviews, by the way, were disastrous. Every single interview. I mean, there was one interview that came late in the game where she got interviewed by like a Muslim influencer and apparently made jokes about bacon. That didn't even get to air. I mean, imagine somebody interviewing Trump and not even airing the interview because it was so bad. You'd never hear that. That would never happen. But this time, but with Kamala, it did. Somebody who supported her still wouldn't air the interview because apparently he knew that it would do more damage to her than good. Other people aired the interviews. Obviously, infamously, 60 Minutes, they aired their interview, but only after they edited it heavily. And they might say, oh, we edit all of the interviews. Might. That, and we can't. If she, let me say this the right way. If when they edit Trump specifically, and I would say anybody on the MAGA side, maybe not every Republican, but every America First conservative for sure, every patriot. When they do those edits, they edit it in a way that attempts to make the person look bad. And when they interview Kamala Harris or anybody else who they like, any Democrats, they do the opposite. They edit it in a way that tries to make them look good. This is very clear. I mean, Kamala's answer, as bad as it was, the one that aired on 60 Minutes, Kamala's answer to the Israel question, it was very bad. And then, but once you saw the full context, her actual full answer, it was abysmal. And they took it from abysmal and made it pretty bad. So, yeah, her press interactions weren't very good. But it wasn't just her fault either. Moving on to number 11. Number 12. Yeah, 12. Her debate performance was good. I mean, it was adequate. I disagreed with her. Obviously, I'm not saying it was good. Like, oh, she said the things that made me consider. No, I mean, but it was clear. Number one, that she had the questions. You know, the CBS whistleblower has already come out and said that got buried. We're never going to hear from that again. We're never going to hear from that again. Someday I might explore it deeper because I think that there still needs to be repercussions for it. But yeah, lower priority. Bottom line is that she knew the questions. She had the answer prepared. They were not allowed to fact check her, even though they fact checked Trump half a dozen times at least. They set it up to where she would look good in the debate, Trump would look bad in the debate. He was debating three people. I don't even remember which idiots were the moderators, but those moderators had a very negative impact on Kamala Harris. Again, they think, they being corporate media and the Democrat Party, and unfortunately anybody in the Union Party swamp, which includes many in the Republican Party, they think we're just stupid. You and I, we are bumbling idiots. And if they say, hey, we're going to do a fair debate, and don't worry, it might not seem fair, but it is because Trump's the one that's going to tell all the lies. We got to fact check him. Kamala, she totally didn't get the questions ahead of time, or can the answers. And we would have fact checked her if she lied once, but she didn't lie at all. Everything she said in the entire debate, everything she said was the absolute truth. Absolute truth. We're not stupid. We saw it. And we saw them influence it. We saw them stick to, I mean, it always, not just this time, it's every time I see something like that, I always think back to the movie Gladiator, right? With Russell Crowe, Joaquin Phoenix. When Maximus is fighting against the former champion, you know, the one that was able to, the legend who was able to win all of his matches and earn his freedom, they brought him back, but they didn't just trust him to be able to defeat Maximus. So they also had tigers right? They had tigers in these secret compartments in the ground. And the tigers were chained. And they had men with these chains, holding the tiger back or letting the tiger loose. And anytime Maximus would get close to the pit, they'd open it up and the tiger would come out and try to get him. And then every time the old champion, his opponent, got close to the pits, the tigers were trying to get to him, but the men were pulling back. They were trying to use the tigers to get to only Maximus, but not to him. The tigers were the debate moderators, basically. And we saw this, and it was blatant. It was crystal clear. Nobody could have missed it. And they didn't. They didn't miss it. And so the debate moderators were trying to help Kamala Harris. They actually ended up hurting her. I truly believe that they absolutely hurt her. All right, so that's the end of that section. Let's move on to foreign affairs. But first, you know what? First, let's take a short break. And when we get back, we'll get to foreign affairs. So stay tuned. Before the election, we had to make the very ominous and truthful announcement that if Kamala Harris had won, then we were going to have to raise our prices over at worldviewbeef.com. It was inevitable. We've been fighting it already throughout the entirety of the Biden-Harris regime, but we knew that we couldn't do it, stay at our current prices for much longer if Kamala were to win. But she didn't. She lost. By golly, that lady. She lost bigly. Donald Trump, of course, won, and we are super excited. So I'm announcing right now, the promise made, promise kept. We are not raising our prices. I know I've been saying for a while that we'd have to. And it wasn't because I thought that Kamala was going to win. I really never did. But I did have a concern that massive widespread voter fraud was going to sway the election possibly in her advantage. And if that had been the case, then we would have raised prices, but we have not. To celebrate this tremendous victory for the United States of America and for patriots across this great and magnificent country, we are extending, really, our biggest sale of all time. We have ran this a couple of times. It's always been successful. I don't know if we'll be, we still have to worry about the economy, but in the meantime, we're going to assume that Donald Trump is going to make things better, and we are going to offer an unprecedented 35% off. Use promo code JDR at worldviewbeef.com. Get long-term storage beef, the good stuff, 25 years shelf life, all-American beef at worldviewbeef.com, and let's make America great again. All right, so let's talk foreign affairs. Kamala Harris botched it. I mean, botched every aspect of foreign affairs. And the funny part is that it really was. It wasn't necessarily in her stances. It was the fact that she didn't really have any. She famously put out one message to Michigan Muslims and a separate message to Pennsylvania Jews, talking about the same topic, but with different stances. It's like, wow. And perhaps more importantly, they did a lot. Their campaign did a lot, especially around the end. They did a whole lot to try to highlight the notion that Donald Trump was somehow bad at foreign policy. And that played right into the Trump campaign's hands. I mean, when they started seeing that Kamala was pushing that angle, it's like, okay, all right. Where do we begin? If we start with the Abraham Accords and move out from there, his first term from a foreign policy perspective was nothing short of fantastic. We didn't start any wars. We didn't get involved in any wars. We ended ISIS. We ended a lot of things. And one thing that when they went down the foreign policy road, Trump made very clear in his campaign, put out the message that was very clear that, look, we wanted to get out of Afghanistan too. So we just would have done it better. They botched it. Kamala botched it. And I remember, I think most of us remember, that she sort of tried to take credit for the Afghanistan pullout before it was realized just how big of a debacle it was. Look, I'm all for. I've been for pulling out of Afghanistan before we got into Afghanistan. So don't get me started there. But with that said, their execution was horrible, and that was an unintentionally appropriate use of the word. So yeah, so let's start with Israel. She made it clear she's very much anti-Zionist. She didn't hold back when she had the opportunity. She let her true feelings be known. Unfortunately, those true feelings didn't reverberate with the Muslim community. There were many Muslim leaders that endorsed Trump, because the way they look at it is this. They're like, so you got Biden, Harris, they're supporting Israel. You got Trump, he'll support Israel. But what's the difference is that Trump will probably get Israel to stop attacking. Trump will probably bring peace to the Middle East as he did before. So, given the two choices, why would, if both of them are going to be on Israel's side, let's go with the guy who's not going to, who's going to end the conflicts earlier. Not, and to say that is, it's like saying, I mean, would the Biden-Harris regime end the conflicts at all? I don't know. I don't think they would. I don't think they want to. I think they like it. It really does help. Whenever there's conflict anywhere in the world and the United States gets involved, that helps the military-industrial complex, and nothing says military-industrial complex quite like Liz Cheney. Now, I was going to put Liz Cheney and Dick Cheney, as a matter of fact, on the list pertaining to people. But the real area where this had the effect was in foreign policy. You could argue, and there were a lot of grumblings from the left, especially from the radical left, who were like, wow, why is she embracing the devil in Dick Cheney? Because they literally think he's the devil, if they believe in that stuff at all, which most of them don't, but whatever. Why is she's out there campaigning with Liz Cheney instead of Bernie Sanders or instead of Barack Obama? Or it's like, hello, what are you guys doing? This is idiotic. I don't think that Joe Biden would ever have campaigned with Liz Cheney. He would have accepted hers and Dick Cheney's endorsement, but Biden wouldn't have gone out there campaigning with them. So, but that's a whole other story. Bottom line is that it was the messaging that was sent out pertaining to her foreign policy. Basically, she was saying, look, I'm like the Biden-Harris regime, which has been disastrous for the Middle East and disastrous for Muslims in the Middle East, but we're going to sprinkle in some Dick Cheney on top of that. Hello? Neocon alert. If there's one thing that came out positive from the Kamala Harris campaign, is that it did expose the truth that many of us have known for years or decades, and that's that neocons are far more closely aligned with Democrats than with America First patriots. Liz Cheney has demonstrated that. A lot of quote-unquote Republicans have demonstrated that. They've proven it. That they're, forget about any of the issues that might qualify them to be Republicans. The fact that they want the military-industrial complex to dominate this nation, the fact that they are in bed with and embrace and are arguably owned by the deep state, those are things that they can't deny anymore, thanks to the Kamala Harris campaign. Yay, Kamala. Of course, you've got China. The relationship with China didn't get talked about nearly as much by the campaign, and there's a reason why. They did not want anybody to picture Kamala Harris going up diplomatically against Xi Jinping or Vladimir Putin, for that matter, or Kim Jong-un. These are areas where Trump has demonstrated incredible strength, far better than I had anticipated. I really did not see it ahead of his first term. I did not see his foreign policy chops until they were in action. And I should have realized, in retrospect, yeah, it makes sense. Because foreign policy and business dealings, there probably aren't very many parallels between private life and public life, between corporate business world versus government world. There probably aren't as clear parallels as there are when it comes to foreign policy versus company acquisition, competitive talks. In other words, Donald Trump was, and still is, very well suited to handle the diplomatic game. Kamala Harris was not. And they didn't want to highlight that, which is why they didn't really bring up China much, but we did. We brought up China a lot, and I think that really did have a very detrimental impact on her campaign. Then there's Ukraine. And we're starting to see a shift, finally. Maybe it's been happening for months at least. But Americans are starting to realize that Ukraine, the aid that's sent to Ukraine, is not about helping them to win. I think very few Americans have any illusions left that Ukraine is going to win this war. They're starting to realize, many of them are starting to realize that this really is about the military-industrial complex and making sure that, I mean, this is crony capitalism just with more people dying from it. That's what it comes down to. They're laundering money through Ukraine. Ukrainian leaders, oligarchs, they're getting plenty of money. Somewhere along the line, so are American politicians and their cohorts. They're military industrial complex puppet masters. All of them are getting paid from this. And meanwhile, Ukrainian and Russian soldiers are dying. Ukrainian and Russian civilians are dying. People want this war to end, and they've given up any hope whatsoever. There should have never been hope to begin with, but they've given up hope that the Biden-Harris regime, especially Kamala Harris herself, would be able to end this war. She has never even attempted to end the war. She's never done anything to explain how she would end the war. She has talked about supporting our allies, which they're not, but supporting our allies in Ukraine. She's talked about how Vladimir Putin is evil and he's a Trump guy and this, that, or the other. She didn't say anything when Vladimir Putin basically endorsed her. Some people say he was joking. I don't think so. But then again, I'm not Russian. Remember, no Russian. Okay. So from a foreign policy perspective, she was terrible. Let's look at the elephant in the room. Let's look at the other elephant in the room. And let me make one thing clear before I get to elephant number one. Let's explain why I'm not going to talk about elephant number two. The border crisis is the no-brainer. That demolished Kamala Harris' chances. As borders are, whether you want to believe she was borders are or not, she was, obviously. But I know a lot of people out there didn't, pretending like she wasn't, that was some right-wing conspiracy theory that she was the borders are. I don't know how they could miss it, because even they were talking about her being the borders are before she failed at it. Then all of a sudden they stopped talking about her, they being corporate media. Corporate media was talking about her being the borders are until she failed and did nothing. Didn't go to the border even. And then it's like, oh, okay, well, maybe we should stop talking about that. So yeah, she was the border czar. That obviously weighed heavily on her campaign. But every attempt she made to try to say that she was going to fix it failed miserably. The attempt failed. Not as badly, of course, as the actual plans that they have in place now, the policies that they have, but they couldn't do anything about it. And I'm going to dive much deeper into the border crisis aspect of not just the election, but also far more importantly, moving forward. How do we fix this? Because it's not just, I know Trump came out yesterday and said, there's no way to avoid it. We got to start deporting. And I agree with him. But this is a problem that's far, far more complex than that. Because we don't have, it's easy to say, we'll deport them, right? But we don't have the knowledge of where they are at this point. We don't. Sure, I mean, we can find them. What happens when they scatter? And they will scatter. Once the deportations start, right now, you see all these quote-unquote migrant facilities out there, right? Those migrant facilities, they will empty out, and then poof, they will vanish, disappear into the interior. Even if they weren't on the quote-unquote list to be deported, they will think that eventually they will be. So once the deportations start, that's when the real problems begin. Problems that are as bad, if not worse, than they are today. Because right now, they're mostly a financial drain. Of course, it increases crime. It increases, don't get me started on Aurora, Colorado, right? But right now, it's more of an economic drain, a financial drain on America. What happens when it becomes far worse? What happens after Trump does start deporting them? And that's the question where we have to answer it, and it's going to be longer than today's show, I assure you. So that's why, by the way, I'm not ignoring the border crisis issue. I'm just going to state it as one reason, even though it's probably about 15 reasons. State it as one reason today so we can get through this list. And then we'll see. Maybe, I'm already planning on it because I'm not going to make it through the list today. So I'm already planning on at least one weekend special report. Maybe we'll do two, because I can't wait to talk about the border. We got to fix it. And I wish that if there was one reason, I wish that Trump could just bypass this whole, got to wait until January thing. And the only reason I wish he could just hop in today and take the reins and take the steering wheel and boot out all the Democrats and Joe and Kamala. I wish he could do that today. It's because of the border. Because every single day that the border is open, every single day that illegal aliens are not being deported, the situation is getting far worse. We might be at a point of no return. I didn't want to say that ever before the election. But we're not talking. I mean, we'll talk about it. Hopefully this weekend, if not for sure next week, I will talk about that issue. So we are going to bypass that one and go to the other big one, the other big elephant in the room, which is, of course, the economy. And I'm not going to list it as one because it really is multifaceted. The obvious one, of course, is inflation. Inflation is killing us. There are Americans right now who are suffering or possibly even homeless because of the massive inflation that has taken place. And people, Kamala in the early days, she tried to blame it on greedflation. That didn't fly for her. Not only because it's not true, because it's obviously not true, but because they couldn't get corporate media to echo it appropriately. Because corporate media, I mean, don't get me wrong, they don't have any problem with telling lies. But that's one of those lies that they couldn't get anybody to say, okay, well, they couldn't get any economists to go on and promote it. They couldn't get any show hosts to say, oh, yeah, that's it. It's greedflation. It's because of corporations. They couldn't get them to do that because to be able to do that, they would have had to shun, in many cases, their own advertisers. And that's something that I don't know if the Kamala campaign understood the calculus there. I think that they thought, oh, they want us to win, so they got to call it greedflation. And then they go to the corporate media, and corporate media is like, wait a second, hold on. Number one, look, we'll lie for you all day. Okay, you know that. I mean, we will lie every hour of every day to try to get you to win. But that's one of those lies that can actually impact us if we tell it. Other lies, we tell a lie, and it's like, oops. That one, we can't just say oops, because we're going to have to go after a lot of the people that pay us money. So we can't do that. We bridge too far. So that hurt, as we all know. And just in case you don't, I don't want to make assumptions here. I mean, the inflation problem is caused by the money supply. We have printed too much money. That's why there's so much inflation. But it can be fixed pretty quickly. And hopefully it will. And that's another one. I should probably do a much longer show specifically about how to truly bring down inflation. And it's not just through policy. We have to... Complex stuff. Let's get into it, because I'm not even halfway done with the list. This is sad. This is silly. This is stupid. What is this? All right, number 17 of my 3 dozen list. Taxes. People were scared. Even on the left. Democrats were scared. Independents were scared. They were scared because the tax plan that Trump has put out there helped them. The tax plan, the reduction of tax reductions in 2018 benefited Americans greatly. And not only did both Joe Biden as well as Kamala Harris, as well as pretty much every Democrat, not only did they not support those tax cuts, but perhaps more important, and they were talking about trying to raise taxes, but only on certain people, right? Only certain income groups. Not only that, but perhaps more importantly, is that Kamala's plan never got spelled out appropriately. It never got put out at all. And that terrified people. Because it's one thing to have a tax plan that may be right or wrong, that we can debate. It's another thing to have a tax plan, but to keep it secret. I couldn't I honestly, that one blew me away, because it's like the fear of the unknown is maybe the greatest fear out there. It's one thing to see something scary coming down the road, right? Obamacare, for example, when we saw it, we were scared of it because we saw what it was. Kamala Harris was talking about a tax plan that that would make people pay their fair share, go after billionaires and stuff like this. But they never gave it a single detail. And they knew what those details were because they had people like Mark Cuban out there talking about it. They had their economists talking about it. They had all these people talking about the tax plan that they had been made privy to some extent, but that the public wasn't. That terrified us. And when I say us, I'm not just talking about conservatives or Republicans. I'm talking about Americans. We're like, wait a second. So you got a tax plan. You're going to raise taxes. You've already acknowledged that. But you're not going to go into details about what that's going to mean or who it's going to affect. Oh, well, it'll just affect the super rich. Really? So I won't have my taxes raised? Well, we didn't say that. Scary stuff. Number 18, spending. Believe it or not, Americans, for the first time, I would say, in history, and this really started happening, I would say, during the Obama years, Americans started waking up to the idea that you can't just spend your way out of problems. We saw, and when I say the Obama years, you could really say it was during the Bush years, because Bush really tried to spend his way out of problems, and it didn't work then. Then we had the economic slowdown, collapse, whatever you want to call it, in 2008, 2009, and we spent our way, quote unquote, out of it. But did we really? And were any fundamental changes made? No, they weren't. The changes that needed to be made were simply misdirections. Okay, it's like we've got bad guys. We're going to try to put some of those bad guys away in jail. And I think, as I recall, there was one person that went to jail. One person who went to jail over the debacle of 2008 and 2009. But it's like we've got all these problems. We're going to try to fix them, but in the meantime, we're going to let them being the bankers, we're going to let them figure out how they're going to screw us over next before we shut the door on the way they screwed us over before. It's really what happened. And people started coming to that understanding that it's not just about bailouts here, bailouts there. It really comes down to government spending. Government spending, the more the government spends, the worse off the lives of Americans. And it's not just because it's a waste of our tax dollars. It's because, generally speaking, if government spends time, money, manpower on any effort, it's going to be bad. And I'm not just talking about the federal government. You can name, for every good, quote unquote, good program, and most of those programs are at the local, county, and maybe at best state level. For any good program that actually works, that came from government, you're going to have 10 that did not, that failed miserably. That, trains to bridges to nowhere, and bullet trains, high-speed rail from here to there, to there, to there, to there. I mean, how many Americans have been on high-speed rail here in the United States of America? Billions have been spent, tens of billions, maybe hundreds of billions, have been spent over the decades. It's almost like high-speed internet. Let's spend billions of dollars on high-speed internet so that we could connect all of America. We could get all of America connected. We'll spend billions of dollars on it. spend years on this. Put Kamala Harris in charge. And we're still waiting for that first person to be connected. It took people like Elon Musk and Donald Trump and RFK Jr. and Tucker Carlson and Joe Rogan. It took those people to make Americans realize that spending is bad. And Kamala Harris has always talked about the need to spend more. Now, let's be fair here. Donald Trump isn't exactly a spending cutter, but hopefully, Lord willing, he will open up to that more, hopefully with a Republican-led Congress and Senate, that there can be some fiscal responsibility. I've talked often about how I'm changing the focus of my show, depending on the results of the election. One of the things that I'm going to be focusing on, and I talked about this the other day, is focusing on getting proper legislation. If we do indeed end up, and it looks like we will, end up with a Republican-controlled Congress to go along with the newly Republican-controlled Senate, that will hopefully not be led by Thune or Corbyn. I'm not a Rick Scott fan per se, but he's definitely better than the guys that are currently being the McConnellites that are definitely being put out there. And to be fair, I mean, Rick Scott is kind of a McConnellite too, but at least he is somewhat conservative. But anyway, that's a talk for another day. So, but back on topic is if we get the control of the House, which it looks like we will, we have control of the Senate now. Hopefully, we'll be able to put forward some fiscally responsible legislation, and that it will be a focus of this show. And I will encourage other shows, other blogs, other websites, other conservatives, patriots in media to start really pushing for that, because we didn't do it. We didn't do a good job of that. 2017 through 2019, when last time we had control over the House, the White House, and the Senate. We need to do a much better job now, because Trump, he likes to spend. He does. Maybe not as much as Joe Biden or Kamala Harris or Barack Obama or George W. Bush, but he likes to spend more than he should. And so we need to get that fixed. Let's see, how much time do we got? All right, let me bust through a couple of these. These ones are, again, reasons why Kamala lost, the reasons why Trump won, that are bigger than, more important than the idea of racism or sexism being the downfall of Kamala. She was an installed candidate. The biggest mistake that they made, and by mistake, it was actually, I would think, a manufactured mistake, a unforced error, maybe an intentionally unforced error by Joe Biden, and probably it was actually Dr. Jill Biden who made the call. But when they pushed for Kamala when he supported her, I don't think in their wildest dreams they imagined it would work. I really don't think I thought they thought, you know what? Let's just throw out there. We'll throw some confusion out there, and we'll throw our weight behind Kamala, and then so they're going to have to, they'll back. They've got we'll back Kamala. Nancy will back Gavin Newsom, and Obama will back Mark Kelly, and there's going to be turmoil, and it's going to look really bad. I don't think that even the Bidens realized that the Democrats are going to look at the calculus and say, oh, crap, he really just endorsed Kamala? We don't want Kamala. Do we fight it? What do we do? And they're like, we don't want to fight it. Joe screwed us over. Oh, well, I guess we'll make the best of it. Look, we've still got the voter fraud. We still got the illegal aliens. We still got control. We'll be fine. Okay, we'll be fine. The good part about Kamala is that we can absolutely totally control her, probably more so than we could control, Newsom or Kelly. So let's go with it. Let's just, you know what? Screw it. Let's unity. We'll deal with Joe later. Call Hillary. Maybe we'll have Hillary deal with Joe and punish him. But in the meantime, all right, let's just stick with Kamala. And when that happened, Dr. Jill was like, hey, Joe, we did it. We got him to embrace Kamala. Now Obama even backed her. We know that Obama hates her, but he even came out and endorsed her. And Joe's like, where's my ice cream? It's a true story. That's exactly what happened. I have a video somewhere. I'll find it later. That is exactly what happened. All right. Top of the hour. If you're watching on certain channels, I bid you adieu. If you're watching on my channel, and I will see you shortly.
I'm Jonathan Rose, CEO of Genesis Gold Group. As Americans, we work hard every day to provide for our families and ensure their future. But with the uncertainty facing our economy, it is more important than ever to safeguard your wealth and protect your retirement savings. Educated investors look to safe haven assets to shield themselves from the economic storm. Tangible assets like gold and silver can provide stability, security, and most importantly, peace of mind. In 1997, the Taxpayer Relief Act allowed Americans to hold physical precious metals like gold and silver in their IRAs for the first time. Today, Genesis Gold Group helps our clients transfer existing IRAs, 401ks, and other retirement accounts into physical gold and silver, tax and penalty free. With thousands of satisfied clients, 5-star reviews, and fully accredited with the Better Business Bureau, our experienced team is here to help you navigate the process, start to finish. Now is the time to educate yourself on the importance of a diversified portfolio, including tangible assets like gold and silver. Call now to receive our free wealth protection kit and digital dollar defense guide. Call now and we'll include our extremely popular silver prepper bar free when you open your account. Add it to your IRA or have it sent to your home. Call Genesis Gold Group today at 800-200-GOLD. Prepper bar only available through Genesis Gold Group.
All right. So the first, a little over half of the list. This is a list of reasons that Kamala Harris lost, reasons that Donald Trump won, that are all, each one individually, is far more impactful, far more important than what many on the left are saying, which they're blaming it on racism or sexism or whatever. No, these are actual real reasons, and each individual one is more impactful than what many are saying that it is. The first half, first 19 or so on the list, that took us about an hour and a half. Don't worry, even though we're just over halfway done, the second half of the list is a lot more self-explanatory. I don't have to go into nearly as many details. And it's not, keep in mind, it's not that any of these are any less important. It's just that some of those need a little bit more explaining as to why they were such important factors in the results of this election. Let's do a quick recap. We started off with the people. These are the people who had direct influences, good or bad, for Kamala Harris, good or bad for Donald Trump. Well, all of it was good for Trump, but yeah. So number one, Tim Walz, Elon Musk, Tulsi Gabbard, Joe Rogan, RFK Jr., Nicole Shanahan, J.D. Vance, and then Steve Navarro and Steve Bannon and Peter Navarro. Steve Bannon and Peter Navarro, plus, of course, the J6 prisoners. All of them had a very direct influence on this election. Then let's talk about, we talked about Kamala Harris's challenges with the press. First, she had her word salads, of course, which we've known about that since before she was a candidate. But then once she started getting into it, she started hiding from the press a lot. It took her over a month to have her first interview, and she never had a press conference. When she did have those interviews, though, they were horrible. I mean, her first interview, she had Tim Walz, her support dog, go with her to hold her hand while she was getting beat down by the big bad, very pro-Kamala journalist. I don't remember who it was. And then from there, it just went downhill. Even worse. Don't get me started on 60 Minutes. The debate moderators themselves, they proved when they were, quote-unquote, moderating the debate between Donald Trump and Kamala Harris, they proved that they were on Team Kamala the entire way, and people noticed. People understood exactly what was happening. And they realized that, holy crap, they really are trying to stack the deck against Trump, and that had a negative impact. Yeah, it could have been a very good debate for Kamala had the moderators just been moderators, but because she had all the questions, she had all the answers pre-planned. But, oh well, and we'll discuss that particular whistleblower from CBS at some point in the future. All right, now we're on to the foreign affairs. Israel-Hamas, she's tried to play both sides, and she was able to win neither. China, it's self-explanatory, and of course the fading sentiment in Ukraine, where she didn't offer to help win the war. She just said, we're going to support Ukraine indefinitely, pretty much, and that cannot be. Then we move on to the economy. Of course, inflation, taxes, spending, all of these were important. And last but not least, the fact that she was an installed candidate. Had they been able to actually have a true, even a mini primary, that would have been better than saying, hey, here's a lady who's ran in 2 elections and never gotten a single electoral or a single primary voter. But hey, she is your consensus candidate, thanks to Joe Biden and his various machinations. And we can probably thank Dr. Jill for that. All right, now, number 20. And you cannot downplay this at all. Trump ran a great campaign. Not to be clear, I don't think it was as good as his 2016 campaign. Just saying. I think his 2016 campaign was a bit, but it was different. It's almost unfair for me to say that because 2016 was more of an introduction, right? People needed to know what Trump would be like as a politician. They had no experience with that. The 2020 and the 2024 campaigns were about taking the experiences that we all had during his first term and trying to translate that into victory. And I think he won both. I think that a majority of Americans wanted Trump to be president of the United States in 2016, 2020, and 2024. Unfortunately, 2024 is the only one where he won the popular vote because they gave up on voter fraud once they realized that he had set it up as too big to rig. They said, cancel the trucks. And they didn't get the word out fast enough because a lot of trucks still delivered a bunch of Kamala ballots there late at night until it's like, wait, we can't win. The math doesn't add up. Abort. No, not the babies. Abort. We'll get them later. Sorry, that was awful. Terrible joke. Very, very poor taste, especially considering how pro-life I am. I apologize for that. I couldn't help myself. So Trump ran a very good campaign. 2016, I think the best introduction campaign of all time. I mean, this is an introduction to a man that most people already knew, but introduce him as a leader, as the leader of the free world. That campaign was phenomenal. Okay, facing major headwinds from media, facing major scandals. Bombshells dropping here or there allegedly. Yeah, that they did a great job at fixing that. Well, fast forward to 2020, another good campaign. I think they did pretty well. The challenge there, of course, was COVID and massive widespread voter fraud. But and then of course they stole the election. 2024, facing similar challenges, not with COVID, but with massive widespread voter fraud planned. But they were able to, thanks in large part to all the other things we're saying on this list, but also thanks to very, very good messaging. Not great, but very good messaging. And I would rather they put out good messaging in this election. Obviously, it worked. Versus because a lot of times when you try for great messaging, you miss the mark. Okay, high reward, high risk. They went with sort of the, it's the fourth quarter. We're up by 2 touchdowns. Let's not take anything for granted. But there's no need to be blitzing every play on defense, and there's no need for us to throw deep. Work the clock. That's what they did, and I think they did a fantastic job of that aspect of it. That's why the campaign messaging was good. It could have been great, but great could also turn into disaster, and they didn't want to risk any disaster. So, well done there, Trump campaign. These next two, 21 and 22, I'm just going to say one word for each. Well, technically 3 words for one, but first let's start off with the word garbage. That's all I got to say. Riled people up. But the one that riled people up even more, technically 3 words, Mark Cuban, and calling women who support Trump dumb and weak. That didn't have the desired effect. I would hate to, Mark Cuban in his supreme narcissism is probably thinking to himself, my gosh, if only I hadn't said that. I really screwed that up. I lost the election for Kamala Harris. Delusions of grandeur. And he did not lose the election for Kamala Harris, but it helped. It contributed. It definitely did that because it got a lot of women riled up. Number 23, the assassination attempts. I hate to say, it was a positive that there were assassination attempts. That's not what I'm saying. Not by any means. But the fact that they did happen, it had an impact. especially amongst minorities who have experienced in their lives, in their old homes, any minorities, any immigrants, legal immigrants, who maybe they came from countries where there was tyranny or there were bad guys in politics. Because here's the thing, whether they knew it in consciously or unconsciously, those who have seen it, those who've lived outside of this nation, who've lived in South America, Africa, parts of Asia, and currently apparently parts of Europe now, they know that when there are assassination attempts, it's always against the good guys. I mean, when was the last time you saw assassination attempts against Xi Jinping or Kim Jong-un or the Ayatollah Khamenei or Nicolas Maduro or anybody else? You don't see the assassination attempts against those guys. They always try to assassinate the good guys. And Trump, again, whether that registered consciously or unconsciously, it did have a positive impact. A lot of Americans who maybe wouldn't have voted for Kamala, but probably wouldn't have voted at all, made a decision after July 13th that, man, we really got to get this guy back into office. So as much as I hate to paint the assassination attempts in any positive light, they did have an influence on the election. That's undeniable. Number 24, the border crisis. We talked about why. I'm not going to talk about it as much, but I do want to note it out there. What I will talk about, however, is number 25, sanctuary cities. And I will go back to the border, like I said, if you missed it before. It's not that I'm ignoring the border crisis. It's that I can do, and I will do, an entire show on how the border crisis, number one, why it happened. Number two, why it's failing to meet the goals of the globalist elite cabal and the Uniparty swamp. And number three, how Trump is, hopefully, Lord willing, going to fix it. But I do want to talk about sanctuary cities, which is number 5. Sanctuary cities did have a direct impact. And I'm not just talking about the crime aspect of it, which we'll get to. I'm talking about, you even when you are in Chicago, okay, like the birthplace of Obama democracy, right? Or it's not really democracy, but Obama Democrats at least. When you start losing the African American population in Chicago, when they start going and saying, hey, these sanctuary city policies, they suck, you're hurting us. What about us? Why are we not getting any love? You're opening up migrant facilities everywhere. You're giving them all sorts of perks. Meanwhile, my kids are hungry. And that had an impact, a big impact, especially on cities. It could have been left-leaning cities in even blue or purple states where they might not have come out and said, oh my gosh, I'm going to vote for Trump. But secretly, they're like, man, I don't like the sanctuary city stuff. I'm voting for Trump. It's funny because there were campaign ads out there by Kamala. It was targeting women. It's like, and some men, not really men. They were more betas, but it was basically like, hey, nobody knows who nobody knows who you're going to vote for, who you actually voted for. You don't have to tell them. So, I did what I thought was best for the country. All right, MAGA. But secretly, they're voting for Kamala Harris. I think the opposite was true. I think there were a lot more people that were like, man, yeah, no, I'm totally supporting Kamala Harris. And then on Election Day, Donald Trump. I think that happened a lot. In places like Philadelphia, okay? Leftist city, Democrat run for decades in a state that was super, super important. One of the reasons we took Pennsylvania, I would argue, is because of sanctuary city status in the area. Which leads us to crime. Look, crime, they tried to pretend like it wasn't there. We have eyes to see. We have ears to hear. We know what's happening. We know, especially if you live in a city, you're aware that crime is up. A lot of it has to do with the illegal aliens. A lot of it has to do with the leftist policies that allow crime to run rampant, that allow criminals to get basically pampered. Okay, there's a reason why so many criminals in these leftist cities, they go out, they commit crimes, they're let go, then they go out and they commit more crimes, and they're let go. It's just a cycle. People see this. I mean, at least local news is reporting on that stuff. And when you have Democrats saying crime is down, people are saying, no, it's not. And Democrats are saying, yeah, it is. Yeah, it is. Just stop, stop lying. It's like, what? I'm not lying. I see crime is up. I mean, I don't feel safe going to places that I totally felt safe going to in 2019 and 2020. So no, don't tell me that crime isn't up. It's like, no, it's not. Look at the FBI statistics. The FBI statistics changed. Oh, never mind. Don't look at the FBI statistics. The FBI, they're liars too, just like you. And that was the messaging. It was awful. And so, which is why number 27, I kind of melded these last two together, or two, not the last two, but I melded those two together, crime and then the denial of crime. Not only is the crime bad, but they were pretending like the crime wasn't bad. And that's a very awful combination when you're trying to not only harm people, which the Democrats are, they're trying to harm people, but then they're trying to convince the people that they're not being harmed when they are being harmed. Trying to convince people that they're safe when they're not. They're trying to tell people, don't pay attention to the crime. Pay attention to us telling you that the crime is down. Trust me, it's okay. It's safe to go outside. It's safe to go anywhere. Send your wife, send your kids to go get a gas station at midnight, or to go get gas at some. Anyway, it bugs me. But we won, so I guess I'm not too bugged. Number 28, corporate media trust. It's been long talked about. I am going to be focusing a good chunk of my time exposing corporate media, legacy media, as Elon Musk calls it, but I like to call it corporate media because it's not just about ABC, NBC, CBS, CNN, Fox News. It's also about Google, Facebook, even X. Look, X isn't done. It's not perfect yet. It's not even close to being perfect. There's still a lot to fix over at X. Is it exponentially better than it was now that Elon Musk is in charge? Yeah, okay. Granted. We need to take that model, make it better, but in the meantime, take that same model and try to either apply it to Facebook, Google, and the other bad guys, or get rid of them altogether. I think that that second scenario is the most likely case. We're not going to be able to reform Facebook. We just have to get people off of it. We're not going to be able to fix Google. We just have to get people to stop using Google. And that's a monumental task. I get it, but we'll try. We will do. There is no try or something to that effect. Number 29, noteworthy non-endorsements. Endorsements, I've said for a long time. Endorsements from people that often give endorsements are meaningless. The endorsements that actually matter are the ones that don't come all the time, every election. Okay, Danica Patrick, I didn't list her. I almost did. I didn't list her on there because she noted not only has she never supported a candidate publicly, she's never voted in her life until this year. And I thought, she needs to be on the list, except I thought, no, she doesn't, because she didn't have that big of an impact. But she did represent that type of mentality. Her endorsement was greatly appreciated. But it's the non-endorsements, Washington Post, LA Times, USA Today, places that have in the recent past, endorsed presidential candidates, including Joe Biden, for them to not endorse. That made the news. Had Washington Post endorsed Kamala Harris, that wouldn't have been a big deal. The fact that they chose not to endorse anybody was a huge deal. That was a tremendous deal. And it did affect the election because it made people question, it's like, what do they know that we don't? What does Jeff Bezos know that I don't? Why would they, why? Same thing with LA Times, same thing with USA Today, same things with many, many, many people. So we will see what the repercussions from that are. This could be the last time that these leftist rags don't endorse, because I do believe there's going to be some blowback. Hopefully there won't be. I'm not hoping for it. I really hope that people accept and acknowledge that it's their newspaper, their publication, their right to not endorse. Number 30, voter fraud fears. People were concerned. It was clear because we were seeing examples of widespread voter fraud before the election. And I think that drove a lot of people who might not have been too concerned about voting in places like, polls were showing that Trump was way up in certain states, especially some battleground states. It looked like he was definitely poised to win. But, number one, you can never trust the polls. Number two, when you start seeing reports of machines breaking, when you start seeing reports of ballots disappearing, ballot box or ballot, ballots, not, that is, yeah, you get the idea. So, and I apologize. I keep having all of these. I need to learn to just turn off all notifications because I keep getting these texts and calls and stuff. Got to stop that. All right. Number 28. No, I'm sorry. I skipped number 28 is what I did. Sorry. We're going to skip 28. 31. This is the big one. It's a very big one because abortion had a dramatic effect on the election. But I think that at the end of the day, it really helped Donald Trump. And you'd be like, no. Like 63% of Americans are pro-choice and support abortions. That's true. That is definitely true. But the left, Kamala Harris, their stance, and they wouldn't say it, but they wouldn't deny it either. So it was assumed their de facto stance was abortion up until birth. And when they tried to sort of debunk it during the Tim Walz, J.D. Vance debate, they failed miserably. They did a terrible job, and the fact checkers, if anything, that further exposed that a vote for Kamala Harris and Tim Walz was a vote to try to codify Roe v. Wade and make abortion legal nationwide up until birth. Now, you might say, 63% of Americans are pro-choice. But what percentage of those people who are pro-choice, pro-abortion, what percentage of those people are pro-abortion up until birth? Probably not a whole lot. I don't know what the numbers are. I pray that it's not a whole lot. Gosh, that would be awful if it was. If I'm wrong on that one, that would really suck because that would mean we probably should have lost the election. We should be under judgment already, which we probably should be, but that's a discussion for another day. Point is that her message was, hey, we're going to codify Roe v. Wade. And when asked about restrictions or anything like that, they would always just bounce away from the question. They would deflect. And that allowed people to realize that, they want abortion up until birth, legal with no restrictions ever. Whereas Trump did a good job. He did a great job. His team did a good job of noting that Trump's stance on abortion is to leave it to the states. And it was a strategic move to not really highlight that much more than, for example, him saying, hey, I would veto. The furthest he went was saying that he would veto any abortion bans at the federal level. If abortion ban legislation hit his desk, he declared that he would veto it. I disagree with him on this, but from a campaign perspective, it worked. People realized that they could go with, and we're talking about pro-abortion people, pro-choicers. They said, we've got Kamala unwilling to admit, but giving clear signals that she wants abortion up to birth. And you got Trump, who says, I want to keep the federal government out of it. Which one are we going to go with? And I think that a lot of people came to the conclusion that it would be better to go with Trump and his very middle of the road stance. Okay. It's, it was very, to me, it was a milquetoast stance. Yeah. But then again, I'm an anti-abortion radical. So, but again, as far as we're just talking about the election, it definitely helped him win. Okay. If he did what I wanted, it would have hurt him. I get it. I'm not trying to say that, he should have sworn to fight a crusade to end abortion in America with no exceptions. The Rucker plan. No, that probably wouldn't have flown. He probably would have lost. So, Lawfare, number 32, Lawfare. We talked about it a bit before, but I want to highlight it here. Jack Smith today basically signaling that his lawfare against Trump is over. What's the point? DOJ doesn't go after sitting presidents. and it's futile at this point, and he's probably going to get fired anyway. So, I couldn't imagine him not getting fired, but he's signaling that it's over, which proves once again. I mean, we keep seeing it after the election. We keep seeing, oh yeah. So, in other words, you're telling us that Jack Smith's entire case against Trump was designed specifically to make him lose the election, not because you think he actually committed any crimes, right? Of course, you got Letitia James saying that she's going to go after him further. We'll see how that pans out for her. But as far as, Jack Smith and lawfare in general, lawfare has not worked at all. What it has done is it has alerted the American people that the party that's saying that Trump's going to weaponize the DOJ and go after his political opponents, that party has weaponized the DOJ and went after their political opponents. And that registers in people's minds. They're like, wait a second, aren't you the ones that are saying that he's going to do this, but you're actually... I mean, start doing the Democrat shimmy, swaying back and forth. It's called the deflection dance. Number 33, this is I wouldn't say it's controversial because it's not a big deal, but I would argue that the moment when Kamala really started hardcore losing voters, was when she declared that she was going to end taxes on tips. And you might say, what? It's not a big deal. Nobody cares about that anymore. And nobody cared about it back then because Trump had already said it. And that's the point. That's the point. We highlighted, we as in corporate media, conservative media, alternative media, we highlighted the fact that she stole that idea. And it made people question her competency, her policies or lack thereof. It's like she finally talks about a policy and it's Trump's. What? That's not real, is it? And you see the clip of her promising to end taxes on tips, and it's like, holy crap, who is this person and why is she running for president? I think it had an effect. And the last but not least, and it's funny, I just watched a video. You can find this video over at thelibertydaily.com. I've watched a video of Rachel Maddow basically calling for people to become pirates. You see people like Jimmy Kimmel out there. Was it Jimmy Kimmel? Jimmy Fallon. Sorry, I get all the late. I don't watch late night. I mean, it was Letterman was probably the last one I ever watched, and only rarely. I don't know. Anyway, I get the Jimmys mixed up. But one or both of the Jimmys went after Trump hard before the election, crying now. Yeah, was it? No, it wasn't Jimmy. I don't remember. Watch, it's probably not even Jimmy. It's not a Jimmy. Anyway, one of the late night dudes, and all of them have gone after Trump at some point during this time, but they're not, Rachel Maddow, you can sort of get it. People in the Kamala Harris campaign, sure, you can get it. But when you start having Kamala supporters with audiences such as, these late night show hosts, such as, various TikTokers or whatever, people that, and I'm talking about the ones that are generally throughout every other time during the year, they're mostly apolitical. They got vile. It's almost as if they didn't realize that, they wanted to have an emotional appeal. They overestimated their personal influence. They were asking people to listen to them, not because of any vast knowledge that they have, but because you like me and I hate him, so you can't vote for him. That was the message. And again, they got vile about it. They were ugly in their nature, but they were ugly in their words, ugly in their rhetoric. And again, it's very similar to a Chinese finger trap, right? The harder you pull, the tighter it gets. That's what was happening to many of the leftist influencers. People that support her, supported Kamala Harris, but they failed in delivering that support because they got too involved. Robert De Niro, I guarantee you Robert De Niro did not convince anybody to vote against Trump. With all of his wicked words, nobody's like, oh my gosh, I was going to vote for Trump, but now because Robert De Niro said when started cursing on television at me, Now I'm going to switch votes. But all of them, whether it was Robert De Niro or I forgot, was the guy that plays the Hulk, Ruffalo, is that right? Ruffalo? Pretty much all the Avengers. When you have them out there lecturing us, basically, lecturing us about how we should vote. They don't seem to care about politics when the border crisis is destroying lives. They don't seem to care about crisis or about politics when we can't afford to buy milk, eggs, gas, because they don't have to worry about that. And it's like, yeah, no, just buy eggs. What's wrong with you little people? Why wouldn't you just go buy eggs? It's like it's only like $10 a dozen. I mean, who doesn't have $10? They were vile. They are vile. And they were reviled. As a result, that had an impact. I'm not going to go through the rest of the list because the timing, we're coming up on a 2-hour show. I try to keep it under 2 hours every time. So over the weekend, we will go ahead and do at least one emergency broadcast, one special report. It's not an emergency, but a special report just because I had no idea that this would take so long to get through this list, and we're not done yet. So one more show at least over the weekend, maybe two if I go deep dive into the border crisis and how we can fix it. If not, I'll save that and more for next week. But in the meantime, stay frosty. We've got a lot of work to do moving forward. We can't just say, okay, Trump won. Time to let the good times roll. No, we actually have to move. We have to take action. We have to correct the mistakes. One thing that you can do if you're like, well, what do we do? One thing you can do right now, call all your senators. If you call your Republican senators and tell them you do not want Cornyn, you do not want Thune. I'm not going to tell anybody to embrace Rick Scott. He seems to be the only one who's not awful. He seems to be the least awful, I guess. The most conservative. Okay? And probably the most in Trump's camp. I don't like him. I mean, it's not that I don't like him. I don't respect him. I don't think he's a very good senator. And I don't want him to be Senate leader. But compared to the two right now that are being strongly considered, Cornyn and Thune, not even close. Give me Rick Scott all day. I'll take 10 of him. Okay? I mean, we don't want another Mitch McConnell. And both Cornyn and Thune are the next Mitch McConnell, just younger. Fewer freezing moments. They're not good. They're rhinos. They're neocons. They are maybe not as bad as Mitch McConnell yet, but it took Mitch McConnell some time to get as bad as he is now. Give Cornyn or Thune enough time, and they might be worse than Mitch McConnell, and that's just not acceptable. So, no. Again, I'm not mega cheerleader for Rick Scott because I think he's mid. I mean, he's not. He wouldn't be in my top 10 choices, but his opponents, they would be definitely in my bottom 10 choices. So, whereas Rick Scott wouldn't be. Again, he'd be top 20, maybe. I mean, he has his voting record is relatively conservative. I mean, and he has expressed pro-MAGA concepts. He's not bad. I like him. I mean, I don't like him. I accept him. If he was Senate Majority Leader, I'd be like, okay, all right. I would be confident that we would get some stuff done over the next 2 years. With the other two, no, I'm not. So point being is that this isn't the Senate Majority Leader show. Point is that don't sit back. Don't do nothing. We got work to do. That's if you're not sure, which particular battle you want to start fighting today or tomorrow or over the weekend. That's a good one. Get the word out. Let's just stop Thune, Cornyn, whatever. Stop that in its tracks. Lord willing, I will be back very soon with another episode. But in the meantime, stay strong, stay safe, and God bless.
A large retail store just canceled a huge order, leaving us with a ton of extra My Pillows. But you know what? That's their loss. I'm gonna make it your gain. For the first time ever, you get standard classic My Pillows for wholesale prices, only $14.88. I can't believe I'm even saying that. Only $14.88. But it gets even better. For a limited time, I'm gonna offer my entire classic collection at wholesale prices. Upgrade to a queen size My Pillow for just $18.88. King size only $1 more. Get my body pillows for $29.88 and multi-use My Pillows for only $9.88. So go to mypillow.com or call the number on the screen. Use your promo code to take advantage of wholesale pricing for the first time ever on TV, including my standard size My Pillow, only $14.88. They've never been offered this low before. We have limited quantities at this price, so limit's gonna be 10, and once they're gone,